So there's a lot of discussion going on in the world about human nature, to put it one way. And this is specifically regarding people's sexual preferences. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of a taboo topic, but I'm going there. So now there are a lot of people talking about we should be free to express ourselves in whichever way we want. We should be free to have whichever sexual partners we want and basically just live the life we want. Now, the big discussion comes in that where we draw the line, if a line should be drawn, because you now have, or have always had, but there are people who have sexual preferences that are not accepted by society and maybe shouldn't be. Let's take, for example, people who are pedophiles, who are sexually attracted to young children. A child does not have the capacity to understand what's going on. So, in that situation, does the adult still have that right to have that sexual preference and to act out on it? Then let's take another extreme example of people being sexually attracted to animals. Again, the animal does not have the capacity to understand what's going on, especially in that kind of thing. They do what they're programmed to do in the way that they're programmed to do it. Anything outside of that programming, and most of the time they're not going to know what's happening. Then there's even more bizarre, unusual things, like people being attracted to immovable objects, like a train station. Yes, there was a story about someone who's apparently married a train station. So, I'm not actually going to go into the if you should do it or if we shouldn't do it, if it should be acceptable, if we shouldn't accept it. What I'm going to go into is how do we actually get to a point, how does one person come to that point of having those kinds of preferences? And this actually opens up a much larger scale of questioning, because it opens up how do we program ourselves? How do we become the way that we are? How did I come to be the person that I am today, with the preferences that I have, with the opinions that I have, with the personalities that I have, the behavior, body language, posture, all of these things. Now, when it comes to developing ourselves, what happens is that if you do something over and over and over and over again, it's kind of like you physically program yourself, because your brain is busy forming those neural pathways, because you're having, let's say, thoughts that are the same thought over and over and over again, so that will develop a specific neural pathway. Certain movements, like say writing, will have a certain neural network that's set up, which will make it easy for you to write, because you've been practicing it over time and you've developed this neural network that is linked to your muscle memory. So the parallel that I'm drawing here is that having thought patterns is very similar to having physical habits and physical muscle memory and things like that, because it all connects back to how we're structured in our brains. We develop these pathways in our brains, neural pathways that make it easier for us to access and manifest those particular thoughts, those particular behaviors, vocabulary, whatever it is. So we are literally physically programming ourselves. We're hardwiring ourselves according to what we are doing, what we repeat and do over and over and over and over again. So when it comes to sexual preferences, what you'll find is that, yes, there are some people who have that point of a natural expression that they may tend to be more attracted to females rather than males, or males rather than females. But then you have those parts of us that we program into ourselves. Like a very easy example for me to use here is addiction to pornography and masturbation, which is something that's very, very common in a lot of men and a lot of young boys. Once they hit puberty and they discover porn, it becomes this drive because they're feeding a particular habit over and over and over again, and because it's linked to a physical experience that's pleasant, it's that much easier to develop that particular addiction. So we then, because we do these things over and 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 over again, over years, we make ourselves to be who we are. And yes, that does also include personalities, particular behavioral traits, habits, thinking patterns, opinions. Now, the question becomes, okay, how do we change these things? Because everyone, I'm sure, knows how difficult it is to change a set behavior, whether it's stopping smoking, or you deciding to give up coffee in the mornings, or you've noticed a particular habit that you have, a physical tic, or a word that you're using with every second word that you speak is this particular word, and you want to stop saying it. It can be quite challenging to stop doing these things that we have been doing over and over and over again. But the same principle applies in all the different areas of ourselves, whether it's a set of opinions, whether it is a physical habit, whether it is a sexual addiction, or a particular preference that may not be supportive to other people, like, for example, being sexually attracted to young children. It can be changed, not easily. And as with anything relating to changing ourselves, the willingness to change must be there, which means we have to be willing to will ourselves to stop participating in those thoughts, in those behaviors, in those actions that reinforce this habit, this part of ourselves that we have created over time. And a lot of the time, especially with those things that start off when we're very, very young, it can take significant time and significant effort to change that part of ourselves, because it's something that we have it's been a part of us almost our entire lives. It's all we know. So changing that, yes, it's difficult. And yes, we make mistakes, and yes, we have moments where we think, what's the point? It's not hurting anyone. So changing ourselves is essentially the equivalent to reprogramming ourselves, slowly removing and deleting and uninstalling the layers of our old programming that we don't want to be living anymore, and reinstalling the new programming that we do want to live moving forward. And that means actively and deliberately living that new expression that you want to be living, the new thought pattern that you want to be participating in, the new physical behavior, whatever it is. Willing ourselves to do it. So, as with anything in life, you must ask yourself the question, if you are willing to create the change that you would like to create, to stop the particular parts of yourself that you would not like to continue living. And it often feels like we don't want to let go, even though we also do want to let go. It's very much an inner conflict that happens, but that wanting to stay that way is very often more a part of the addictive nature of how we tend to mold ourselves around how we live and who we are and how we live. So yes, it feels difficult to let go, but once you force yourself to let go anyway, even though there's a part of you that doesn't want to, and you keep doing that every day, you let go deliberately, that's when you start actually really creating the change. All right, so please let me know if you have any questions or comments or would like to start a discussion on this point. And remember, if you would like to support me in what I'm doing here, you can go to my Patreon Get Real page and you can become a patron, and you can then request topics and all sorts of things. And anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.